It's November 20th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Starting with President Yoon Suk-yeol's trip to South America. The South Korea leader rounded off his 8-day trip with a commitment to address the climate crisis and support the global transition to clean energy. He also made sure to meet with the G20 member leaders to call for support for South Korea's denunciation of North Korea's tripped deployment to Russia. On the 1,000th day of the Ukraine crisis, Ukraine hit Russia with U.S.-made long-range missiles for the first time, just hours after Russian President Vladimir Putin updated his country's nuclear doctrine, lowering the bar for the use of nuclear weapons. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has nominated billionaire financial services executive Howard Lutnick to lead the Commerce Department, a figure who's been a vocal advocate of Trump's ambitions on using tariffs. President Yoon spent the last day of his South America trip devoting it to South Korea's dedication to beat the climate crisis and realizing a successful global transition to clean energy. Our Kim Do-yeon starts us off.
At the G20, world leaders choose either session 2 or 3 to make an address according to the session's topic, and President Yoon Suk-yeol this year chose session 3 as its theme was Sustainable Development and Energy Transitions. Session 2 was held under the theme Global Governance Reform. On Tuesday local time, President Yoon took the opportunity to share South Korea's actions to overcome the climate crisis and support the world's transition to clean energy.
In particular, he called for the support of G20 leaders for the carbon-free energy initiative aimed at promoting the use and dissemination of various clean energy sources, including nuclear power.
President Yoon also reiterated his message from last year that Korea will act as the green ladder, supporting developing countries vulnerable to climate change. As for sustainable development, President Yoon emphasized the need for a reduction in plastic use. The South Korean government is set to support the 5th session of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee, also known as INC5, for the formulation of the International Plastics Treaty by its members, as the event is being held in South Korea's port city of Busan on November 25th.
The president will emphasize that efforts in energy transition must go hand in hand to achieve greater innovation in addressing plastic pollution and driving digital transformation.
This is because the rapid surge in demand for advanced digital technologies, such as artificial intelligence, is leading to massive energy consumption. Meanwhile, President Yoon also wrapped up his G20 trip with more sideline summits as he called for support for South Korea's condemnation of North Korea's deployment of troops to Russia. In addition, Yoon promised South African President Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa that South Korea would cooperate with the nation as it hosts the next G20. Yoon and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer acknowledged the progress that the bilateral relations have made so far based on the Downing Street Accord. President Yoon is now on his way back to Seoul. He is set to arrive early morning on Thursday, Seoul time, after 8 days abroad. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has tapped a high-profile figure on Wall Street to be the next Commerce Secretary. Now, if confirmed, Howard Lutnick will lead the tariff and trade agenda of the incoming Trump administration. Lee Seung-jae reports.
Higher tariffs and tighter trade policies are expected under the second Donald Trump administration come next January. With a lot of attention on who's going to help the U.S. president-elect lead the agenda, Trump on Tuesday tapped Cantor Fitzgerald CEO Howard Lutnick as his Commerce Secretary. Trump issued a statement saying Lutnick will lead the new administration's tariff and trade agenda, with additional direct responsibility for the Office of the United States Trade Representative. He added that as the co-chair of the Trump-Vance transition team, Lutnick has created the most sophisticated process and system to help create the upcoming administration. Lutnick has an extensive career on Wall Street, having joined the American financial services firm Cantor Fitzgerald in 1983 and quickly becoming the company's president at the young age of 29. However, on September 11, 2001, when terrorists attacked the World Trade Center, The firm lost 658 of its 960 New York-based employees. Lutnick is on the board of directors of the National September 11 Memorial and Museum and has long built his company to honor those lost in the tragedy and support their families. Next on the agenda for President-elect Trump is choosing his nomination for the Treasury Secretary. Trump is set to meet two key figures running for the position at Mar-a-Lago this week. Kevin Warsh, formerly the youngest person appointed to the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, and Mark Rowan, the CEO and co-founder of private equity giant Apollo, will meet Trump for an interview. Reports say that Trump's transition team is demanding the candidates promise to focus on the campaign promise of raising tariffs. The Secretary of the Treasury will be another key position under the incoming Trump administration, as they play a key role in designing U.S. economic policies such as trade, taxes, and banking regulations. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Bitcoin has soared to a new all-time high, continuing its rally in the wake of Donald Trump's election victory. According to a U.S. cryptocurrency exchange Coinbase, Bitcoin reached a new all-time high briefly, surpassing the $94,000 mark in the early hours of Wednesday morning Korea time. That marked a 35% increase since trading below $70,000 2 weeks ago during the U.S. presidential election. The world's biggest cryptocurrency by market cap has been on an upward trajectory since Election Day, with the incoming Trump administration expected to adopt crypto-friendly policies. Ukraine has launched its first long-range missile strike on Russian soil using U.S.-made missiles as part of response to Russia and its announcement of a new nuclear doctrine. Our Moon Hae-ryun has the details.
Ukraine has fired American-made long-range missiles at Russia for the first time, just a day after outgoing U.S. President Biden gave the green light for such weapons to be used. On Tuesday, the Russian Defense Ministry stated that Kyiv used 6 ATACMS, which stands for Army Tactical Missile System, against the military facility in the Bryansk region, which borders Ukraine. They claim to have intercepted 5 and damaged the 6th. Ukraine, however, said the attack was successful and struck an arms depot around 70 miles inside Russian territory. Regardless of the attack's outcome, the event is significant as it marks the first instance of Ukraine using Western-provided long-range weapons to strike Russia's mainland. This comes a day after Washington approved Ukraine's use of ATACMS and just hours after Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a new nuclear doctrine that expands the conditions under which it can use nuclear weapons. Notably, the revised doctrine states that any attack supported by a nuclear power could be considered a joint attack against Russia. It also lowers the threshold for the use of nuclear weapons to respond to attacks that pose a threat to Moscow or its allies. Russia has consistently maintained that any missile attack by a NATO member on its territory would constitute direct involvement in the conflict, and Putin's new doctrine creates a justification for a potential nuclear response. In response, Washington remarked that this latest move came as no surprise and criticized what it called irresponsible rhetoric from Russia. The U.S. has faced increasing pressure to allow Ukraine to use long-range weapons, particularly in light of reports that North Korean troops have been deployed to Russia and are participating in the war. The shift in Washington's policy heightens its involvement in the war despite U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's criticism of U.S. aid and pledge to end the war quickly.
So there is the understanding that Ukraine needs to do all that it can between now and January, mid-January, in order to get itself into that best possible position, because it might well be more handicapped than it ever has been before come 20th January.
While Ukraine had initially been expected to attack the Kursk region where North Korean troops are reportedly deployed, experts say that this limited attack in a single location rather than Kursk could be a test to gauge Russia's reaction. With this latest attack from Kyiv, tensions are expected to escalate. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Tuesday's attack that came hours after Russia pressed ahead with updating its nuclear doctrine shows Ukraine wasted little time in making use of the U.S.-made weapons. Does this tit-for-tat gesture only mean a new page in the Ukraine crisis? We're joined by Dr. Bong Young-sik this morning. Welcome. So Ukraine launched U.S.-made missiles just hours after Russia announced its updated version of the doctrine. Now, would you say the new doctrine is of no concern to Ukraine?
Of course, it's a great concern for Ukraine, but at the same time, as the analyst at the Channel House clearly explained that Ukraine's priority is to seize as much strategic assets and territorial assets before there will be a ceasefire negotiations taking place in conjunction with the inauguration of the new president of the United States, Donald Trump, on January 20th next year. So there's no strategic needs for Ukraine military to waste any time to test the willpower of the Putin government of Russia with the newly revised nuclear doctrine, as well as attempts to gain any strategic benefits by launching, ATACMS authorized by the Biden administrations to hit any targets inside the Russian territory this time.
So it's no surprise that Ukraine went ahead with those strikes on Tuesday. Then is the doctrine any threat to or alarm to Western countries which have been backing Ukraine, or it won't bother them at all? What do you think?
It would bother the NATO member countries, including the United States, but at the same time, there's no sense of alarm on the part of the United States or the European members of NATO country at the current moment, because we have not witnessed any critical changes with regard to the nuclear doctrine or posture, the deployment of nuclear assets by Russia. So there is a gap between, deployment of nuclear assets by Russian military and the revision of the nuclear doctrine just announced by the President Putin. Of course, the new nuclear doctrine lowered the tipping point for the use of nuclear weapons by Russia in two ways. One is that previously, the use of nuclear weapons was only to be made in response to an attack that threatens the survival of the state of Russia. But now the threshold is lowered to any attack that poses a critical threat to Russia's sovereignty and territorial integrity, including the territorial integrity in the Kursk region, currently occupied partially by Ukraine military. And the second revision is for the first time, the new doctrine declares that the right to use nuclear weapons by Russia against a state without nuclear weapons, but if that state is, supported by a nuclear power state, such as the United States. But once again, these are only doctrines, not actual changes of nuclear posture or deployment by Russian military.
So that is why the new updated version is more of a threat to maybe Western countries. But let's talk about the attack on Tuesday. Why target the Bryansk border region? I mean, why not the Kursk region that we all are aware of, where North Korean soldiers are currently stationed?
Well, targeting the manpower mixed with Russian soldiers and North Korean troops may serve some strategic and military goals for Ukraine military, but there's no Russian command post or other important strategic assets located in the Kursk area writ large. And at this early stage of the use of the ATACMS missile, it is important to test its reliability, and it is useful for Ukraine military to attack the Bryansk warehouses, which housed artillery ammunition and including North Korean ammunition for their systems, guided aerial bombs and anti-aircraft missiles, and ammunition for multiple launch rocket systems. So it is a priority for the Ukrainian military to use these ATACMS missiles, not for the purpose of the decapitating the command post of Russian military in the Kursk area, which is a very broad region, but gaining specific strategic gains by eliminating the artillery munitions, basically the weapons provided by North Korea this time.
Right. Alrighty, Professor Dr. Bong, thank you so much for sharing your insight with us this morning. We appreciate it as always. Meanwhile, in North Korea, leader Kim Jong-un hosted a Russian delegation in an unusually welcoming way, which experts say may be yet another clue of their new treaty coming into effect. Our Kim Jong-sil tells us more.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un showed exceptional hospitality to Russia's Natural Resources Minister Alexander Kozlov, who arrived in Pyongyang over the weekend. Video released by North Korea's state-run media shows Kim smiling as he shakes hands with the Russian minister and engaging in discussions at a table. Throughout the meeting, Kim is seen smiling widely. The footage also includes scenes of Kim personally escorting Kozlov outside the building, a rare gesture highlighting their growing alignment. North Korean state media also reported that Kim and Kozlov discussed strengthening bilateral cooperation in trade, science, and technology under the new treaty signed in June. The Russian delegation led by Minister Kozlov arrived in Pyongyang on Sunday for the 11th Trade and Science Cooperation Committee meeting. A South Korean Unification Ministry official told reporters on Tuesday that this was the first time a Russian representative has met directly with Kim during this kind of meeting. One expert in South Korea speculated that Kim's exceptional hospitality may be linked to the new treaty coming into effect.
President Putin recently signed the new treaty, and it's possible the delegation brought the ratified documents to North Korea. Once both sides sign them, the treaty will take effect only after the ratified documents are exchanged. I think it's highly possible that those documents were brought along.
Professor Kim added that with North Korea sending a delegation to Moscow on Monday, it's likely the ratified North Korean documents were carried. He noted that the treaty will take effect once the documents are exchanged, which could happen as early as Tuesday. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
The South Korean national football team drew against Palestine for the second time in the third round of World Cup qualifiers on Tuesday, but remained top of Group B. With the match taking place at a neutral venue in Jordan, South Korea gave up a goal in the 12th minute after an error by defender Kim Min-jae. However, Captain Son Heung-min made it 1-1 4 minutes later, scoring his 51st international goal with a close-range shot. Son is now just 8 goals away from becoming the highest-scoring South Korean national team footballer. Despite South Korea being 3 points ahead of Iraq and getting closer to another World Cup berth, manager Hong Myung-bo expressed disappointment after the match and vowed to show improvements next year.
Good morning, I'm Kim Xiang, and this is The World Now. Now we begin today in Hong Kong, where 45 pro-democracy activists and lawmakers have each been sentenced to between 4 and 10 years in prison for conspiracy to commit subversion under the Beijing-imposed national security law. Hong Kong's High Court on Tuesday carried out the sentencing for the 45 activists who were arrested and charged with subversion in 2021 for organizing an unofficial poll to select the best candidates in a 2020 legislative election. Prosecutors said their group's unofficial primary election in 2020 was an attempt to paralyze the Hong Kong government and force the city's leader to resign. Now, former legal scholar Benny Tai, who was largely seen as the mastermind of the unofficial primary, received the longest sentence of 10 years. The UN's Human Rights Office on Tuesday condemned China's use of the national security law to criminalize democratic activities such as freedom of expression, peaceful assembly, and association, which are protected under international human rights law. Now to China's Hunan province, where on Tuesday morning a sports utility vehicle plowed into school children and pedestrians outside an elementary school. Chinese police have not yet provided a number of those hurt, but the state-run media channel CCTV reported that many were injured, while saying none have sustained life-threatening injuries. Police said they have arrested a 39-year-old male over the incident and that an investigation is underway. According to CCTV, students were arriving for classes at Jong-un in elementary school in the city of Changde at around 8 a.m. when a white SUV drove into the groups of pedestrians and school children outside the school. Footage shows the elementary school children screaming and running in chaos, while shouts for help can be heard in the background. Now, Tuesday's morning's incident comes only just over a week after a driver plowed into a crowd at a sports center in Zhuhai City, killing 35 and severely injuring 43. In New Zealand, tens of thousands of people gathered outside the parliament on Tuesday to protest against a bill that the opposition says will dilute the rights of the indigenous Maori people. New Zealand police said that an estimated 42,000 people gathered at the parliament in the country's capital, Wellington, to protest against a treaty principles bill introduced by lawmakers wishing to reinterpret the 184-year-old Treaty of Waitangi, signed between the British Crown and the indigenous Maori leaders. A petition opposing the bill with over 200,000 signatures was also presented to Parliament. In the US, 22 people were stuck mid-air for over 2 hours on a ride at California amusement park Knott's Berry Farm on Monday. Now, a statement from park officials said that the Soul Spin ride had experienced technical difficulties which stopped it mid-cycle at around 2 p.m. local time, leaving 22 people stuck until they were rescued at 4:30 p.m. No serious injuries were reported, but 2 guests were transported to a hospital out of an abundance of caution.
This week's sharp drop in temperatures feels much colder, especially after having highs in the upper teens to 20s last week. Well, again, we woke up to ice and frost in some inland regions with sub-zero morning lows. But highs should go up slightly higher than yesterday, going above norms this afternoon. But the skies will not be as clear. Jeju Island will see on and off rain into late this afternoon with up to 20 millimeters in the forecast from tonight into tomorrow afternoon. And there could be spotty rain in west central areas, including Incheon. Afternoon highs will be similar to slightly higher. Seoul tops out at 12 degrees Celsius, Daegu at 13, Busan and Jeju will be topping out at 15 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Air quality will be decent during the day. Sunshine returns Friday and the warming trend continues through early next week. Then afternoon highs will go down to the single digits after that. Many are coming down with a cold, so take care. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That wraps up our morning edition of Arirang News. We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang.